Hey everybody, welcome back to the Inner Revolution podcast. I'm your host, Enoch Fossum, a marriage and family therapist intern who's specializing in addiction. Today, I want to talk about a powerful driver of change, something that often underlies recovery, resilience, growth, and in the world of therapy and healing, we call these values. Ta-da! So we'll be looking at the role of values within the framework of acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT, and how these values act as our internal compass when we're navigating this difficult territory like addiction to pornography. And you might have heard me talk in previous episodes about the 4 fundamental pivots in ACT. If you haven't yet, go back and listen to the first 4. Everything hinges on these values, on this pivot. Okay? So today we're going to recap all of those briefly, and then we'll move into the 5th pivot here, which is values-based living. We'll explore how values bring all the other processes together and how they motivate change, and how for someone wrestling with pornography addiction, whether personally or working in a clinical setting, values can be a lifeline. And I'll share stories, research, practical exercises that you can use, and we'll have a good time. So let's dive into it. So I'll start with the story. Imagine someone, let's call him Mark. Mark's in his early 30s, married, friend to many, well-educated. He's been battling pornography use for years. He doesn't wake up one morning thinking, I'm going to fail my marriage today. No. He wakes up, wants connection, wants intimacy, wants meaning, but porn becomes a pull, a way of numbing, of hiding, of distraction. Over time, he notices his heart hardening, his wife feeling distant, and his guilt rising, and his time slipping away. And at this point in his life, Mark is attending therapy. His therapist introduces ACT. So the therapist says, let's look at your relationship to this pull or the urge. Let's look at what you are fighting for, and not just what you're fighting against. And that's where values come in. So Mark begins to ask a question. If I weren't drinking from this well of pornography, if I wasn't consumed in it, what kind of husband, father, friend do I actually want to be? And slowly, that starts to shift everything. Not just stopping the behavior, but stepping into a life aligned with his deepest matters, with his deepest what matters, his values. Now, I think that story captures something very real, and that might resonate with you, right? Struggling with pornography, or really any addiction, isn't just about stopping a behavior. It's about turning toward what you truly value. If you focus only on, no, don't do it, you're working from avoidance and fear. But if you say, yes, I face the urges, yes, I feel the emotion, but I'm choosing to live in service of something higher, you engage meaning, and meaning drives persistence. So let's look at how the ACT framework sets this up, and how the 4 earlier pivots prepare the ground, and how values actually bring it home. Before we get into values, let's briefly revisit these 4 pivots, and we'll go from there. Okay? I'll do you a favor. You don't have to go back and listen to my other episodes and help me feel better with my raising my numbers and things like that. That's fine. You can just watch this one. So the first pivot is diffusion. Diffusion is all about noticing your thoughts rather than being dominated by them. For someone with pornography addiction, the thought, I need this to feel better, or if I don't watch, I'll lose it. Those thoughts tend to rule the pornography addict's life, right? If this is something you struggle with, you're fused with those. So diffusion says, that's a thought. I notice it. I don't have to obey it. You learn there goes the porn will fix me story. You separate from it, and that is what's going to give you freedom. The second pivot is acceptance. Acceptance is the willingness to have these unwanted internal experiences, urges, shame, loneliness, fear, instead of spending your life battling or going back and forth or engaging in this tug of war with them. The pattern is generally feel shame, avoid with porn, shame multiplies. back and forth in this little circle over and over and over again. So acceptance says, yes, the urge is there. Yes, the shame is there. I am willing to feel rather than outsource them to a screen. This doesn't mean that you like them, right? Doesn't mean that you have to enjoy them or resign to them. It means you free up energy by no longer fighting them. You drop the rope in this whole tug of war that we're doing. The third pivot is the self as context, and this is a more subtle one. It asks, who is the you that notices all of these thoughts, feelings, and urges? It's not the content or the story that I'm hopeless. It's not the emotion, I feel ashamed, but the observing self, the self that's always there, the context in which experiences happen. By anchoring in self as context, you realize you're not your urges. You're the awareness having them, or you're the person experiencing them. And that shift alone gives you this distance and this perspective to take a 30,000 foot view at what's actually going on. The fourth pivot is contacting the present moment. And this pivot brings you into the now, believe it or not, right? Instead of being stuck in the past, in past shame or future fear, like, oh, what if I relapse again? You bring your attention into the present, into what's happening right now. Urge arises. Right now I feel tension. I notice my breath quickening. My hands are shaking perhaps, or getting a little sweaty. Present moment awareness brings you the opportunity to choose to act, not react. It creates a buffer. It's time for you to be able to actually take that 30,000 foot view, right? So these four form the foundation. They help create psychological flexibility. And we are going to talk about, a little teaser, the sixth pivot. I know we're talking about the fifth one today, but there's going to be a little teaser about the sixth one that we'll talk about in more detail next week, but you'll find out what it is here. But all of this creates psychological flexibility, the ability to contact the present moment fully and to persist or change behavior in service of what actually matters to you. But they're not the end of the story, right? Little do we know. Well, a lot do we know. There are 6 pivots, not 4. So without anchoring in values, we may practice mindfulness or acceptance, but wander aimlessly, have no direction. So let's move now to the heart of today's episode. I know, all of this, all of that, just to get to this point. When we talk about values in ACT, we're not talking about goals or outcomes like, I want to stop watching porn by December, but rather the guiding principles of how you want to show up. From some literature, values are freely chosen, verbally constructed consequences of ongoing, dynamic, evolving patterns of activity which establish predominant reinforcers for that activity that are intrinsic in engagement in the valued behavioral pattern itself. So scratch all that. In simpler terms, a value is a chosen way of being in the world. Something like compassion, connection, authenticity, or responsibility. There you go, much better. When your behavior aligns with those values, you start to feel alive, meaningful. And when it doesn't, you feel off track. And in the context of ACT, values are the why behind the what of actual change. So many people want to change, but there's no what. There's always a why, generally, but the what is hard to find at times, and that could be a lack of values. So your values become the compass. Several authors have pointed out that values are foundational in ACT. The other processes, these 4 other pivots, are essentially means to living according to values. And the research actually supports this. For example, an expert review found that while values work is central in ACT, there are some measurement tools that are inconsistent, but the message is clear. Values matter for behavioral movement. Another systemic review concluded, values-based interventions in ACT show promise and values-consistent behavior correlates with better outcomes. So in short, values are not optional extra. They're core. They are literally what you need to guide you throughout life to become the person you want to be. In the world of pornography addiction, where the pull and the urge is super strong and the shame is heavy, values can become the lever that shifts from avoidance to approach, from hiding to living. Now let's bridge this all, okay? How do values play out when someone is actually dealing with pornography addiction? I'll outline 3 key reasons. First, values provide a positive alternative to avoidance. In pornography addiction, much of the cycle is internal discomfort, shame, loneliness, boredom, stress. Then porn is used to escape or suppress the discomfort. The pattern says, if I don't escape, I'll feel worse. Now values flip the script on this whole shenanigans. It says, yes, I feel discomfort, and I'll move toward what matters anyway. So instead of acting from the avoidant motivation, like, I don't want to feel this, you act for something. I want to live connection or integrity, intimacy, and that gives a richer, more motivating energy than fear. Second, values increase persistence and meaning. Studies in ACT show that behavioral change that is aligned with a person's value is more sustainable. When actions tie into what matters, people are willing to endure discomfort and keep going. And for someone recovering from pornography addiction, relapse risk is super real, right? And it can be scary. Urges continue and shame returns. If you're anchored in values, like I'm committed to being a truthful husband, or I want to be a father who shows up emotionally for my children, you have something to act toward. And this deepens the motivation beyond this guilt or fear of consequences that is super superficial. And third, values integrate the other ACT pivots. Diffusion, acceptance, self as context, present moment, they're the means. But values are the end, or the direction of the end. Without values, you might practice diffusion, which is good, acceptance, helpful, mindfulness, useful, but you might not know why. What's the point of all this crap, right? But with values, you have directional clarity. For example, you diffuse from the thought of, I need porn. You accept the urge. You notice in the present moment. You remember you're not urges, self as context. And then you ask, what value am I actually moving towards instead of giving in right now? And that question in and of itself is transformative once you can actually start to live it. Let me share a little hypothetical clinical vignette for you. Okay, so we'll use Ben as a name. Ben, this isn't about you. All right, my brother Ben, don't you worry. So Ben is a 28-year-old man. He's married, has been married for 2 years, and he's struggled with pornography since his college years. And he reports that every time he tries to quit, he slides back. In therapy, we begin by identifying his values. Through reflection, he names, I want to be a husband who is emotionally available, a friend who is trustworthy, a man who values authenticity rather than hiding. And he writes these down. Then, when urges hit at night after his work, after he's had a stressful day, he uses mindfulness. He notices his body, the craving, the thought of, hey man, just go watch one video, right? That little dictator within that wants that hit of dopamine. Then he diffuses. There's that thought again. And he practices acceptance. Okay. There's desire. There's shame. I feel that. And he taps into self as context. I notice I'm not only the desire, but I am the observer too. Cool. And he brings the present moment awareness. Right now, I'm in the living room, not at the computer. Then, here's the important pivot. Then he asks, which of my values is calling me right now? He realizes authenticity. I want to be present for my wife. He chooses an action aligned with that. Aligned. I said that a little weird. But he invites his wife to talk, or he goes for a walk with her. And over time, that value-driven action lessens the pull of the whole pornography because he's living for something, not just running away from something. He has purpose, and that's why values are here. In this way, values become the compass that points him forward. Okay, so you're here, whether as a clinician listening or someone in recovery. Let's walk through how you can put this into actual practice, especially in the context of pornography addiction. I'll give you a couple exercises that you can do. Exercise uno. Clarify your values. Take a piece of paper or open a journal. Imagine your tombstone or your eulogy. Okay? What would people say about you? What kind of person do you want to be? What do you want to be remembered as? What's helpful is you can use prompts like, I want to be the kind of person who, or I want to live in relationship to others so that, or when I'm at my best, I feel alive when I. So write 2 to 4 of these value statements. They should be short, action-oriented, so use things like verbs, and reflect how you want to be. For example, I show up with honesty and integrity, or I cultivate deep connection with my spouse, or I live creatively and generously. You want to, when you're doing this, avoid goal wording, like, I will quit porn. Stay with how you want to be as a person. This aligns with the ACT literature, right? Values are chosen directions. They're not endpoints. It is a direction we are going, not a destination we are arriving at. You can't arrive at integrity. I mean, if you do, let me know what she's like. But you can't, all right? Another exercise you can do is weekly value reflection and tracking. So at the end of each week, reflect on these questions. In what moments did I live my values this week? And describe the action in the felt sense. In what moments did I drift away from my values? What triggered it? What happened? What did I learn about what matters to me, what my values are calling for? What will I do next week to move closer to one of my values? You might even use a simple values wheel or a list of domains like relationship, work, recreation, spirituality, contribution, and note one action per domain. And what can be really helpful too is going to the relationship or the recovery capital that we've talked about many episodes ago. I'll actually do an episode on that in the future again, the recovery capital. But look at all the domains of the recovery capital and see how you can choose a value in each of those domains and go from there. And note just one action per domain. Research suggests that actions tied to values rather than just symptom reduction improve engagement and will increase your outcomes. Now let's map out how all 5 pivots, diffusion, acceptance, self as context, and contact in the present moment along with your values integrate with pornography addiction. So, urge arises, a thought appears. Just one video, you deserve it, man. Nothing else works. Nothing helps you feel any better than porn does. Boom, you have that urge. Now you have diffusion. You notice the thought. There's that just one voice again, right? You label it as a thought and not a command. Now you move into acceptance. You feel the internal landscape, the desire, the tension, maybe shame or loneliness, and you allow it. Not as permission to act, but as a felt experience. And remember, there's nothing wrong with these thoughts or these feelings. You are a human being. You are going to experience things like this, and that is okay. We then move into the self as context. So you notice you are more than your desire. You're the one noticing it. You anchor it in that observing self. And then you contact the present moment. You slow down, you breathe, you pay attention to where you are. You don't get lost in the story of needing porn, but you contact reality. Then you pivot towards your values. You ask, what matters right now? Which value is calling me? maybe connection, integrity, presence for my spouse, whatever it is. There's no wrong answer for values. Whatever it is, you pick one in that present moment. And then, all right, here's the teaser for next week. There's committed action. You choose a value aligned with the behavior you want. So instead of reaching for porn, you reach for a phone and text your spouse. Obviously, you might even be watching porn on your phone, so you go to the phone app instead. Or you take a walk, you journal, you call your accountability partner. And then reflect. Later, you review. How'd that feel? How'd it go? Did you actually live that value? Where did you drift off? What are you going to adjust next time? Did you end up having a slip? And if you did, remember, it's okay. You're human. You're going to be all right. Start again. Review and see where you can improve. By cycling through this full process, you're no longer simply avoiding relapse. You're building a life that actually matters. And let's be clear. Relapse may still happen, right? Relapse, slips, they might still happen, and that's okay. If you have values as your anchor, then you pick up again your compass and you go towards what actually matters. So here's what I invite you to do later this week, even right after this episode. Pick one value that you write, whether it's today or whenever. Pick a value, okay? And write an action step by next Wednesday at 7 p.m. I will do blank. Let it be small, but let it be meaningful. And build your urge response. Plan using the steps above, make it concrete, and post it somewhere visible. Use your weekly reflection to monitor your value alignment, not just your abstinence from porn. Ask, did I live the value? How did that feel? Instead of, did I watch porn? Yes or no. That's not very helpful at the end of the day. You then want to engage in accountability. So if no one knows that you're struggling, I'm telling you, man, tell someone. Share your values list with this person and your action step, your recovery plan, and ask them, how do you see me living this value? What gets in the way? And when a slip occurs, gently loop back into the process, use diffusion and acceptance to work through it, revisit your values and recommit. Remember, values give you a returning path. They're not a dead end. They're always there for you. So let me leave you with this thought. Rarely is the path of change simply about stopping something. It's far more about starting something meaningful. When you only focus on, don't watch porn, you're anchored in avoidance, which isn't helpful at all. But when you focus on, I want to be the kind of person who blank, you're anchored in values. And that makes a huge difference. Your values are like these North Star constellations. They don't dim when the clouds or cravings pass overhead, right? They still shine, even if you lose sight of them for a bit. You reorient with the 4 act pivots: diffusion, acceptance, self as context, and contact in the present moment. You build the muscle of flexibility, which values, or with values, you build this motive, the aim, the reason to keep going. You can't just white knuckle it, dude. You can only do that for so long. And when addiction to pornography has stolen meaning or connection from someone's life, the reclamation of meaning through values becomes the real healing. So whether you're a therapist guiding someone or a support person walking alongside, or you yourself are navigating recovery, take this seriously. I'm serious. Clarify the values, live them intentionally, and let them inform every urge, moment, and every decision. In doing so, you transform not just behavior, but identity, who you are becoming. And that in and of itself makes the road of recovery, so much more fulfilling. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, leave a like, leave a comment down below. And if you do know someone who could benefit from this episode, go ahead and share it with them. All right, we'll see you next week where we're talking about committed action. Peace.